In April of 2019, 26-year-old Prisma Peralta Reyes' life was in a bit of an upheaval. The single mother had just ended a tumultuous relationship, gotten let go from her job, started a new one, and was apparently trying to rekindle a romance with her ex. Things were changing so quickly in her life that her family wasn't even aware of many of the details. What they did know, however, was that she was absolutely devoted to her 6-year-old son. So when she failed to pick him up from his babysitter on the evening of April 17th, they immediately knew that was not a decision that Prisma had made on her own. Will retracing Prisma's steps on that last day hold the key to finding the young mother and the person responsible for her disappearance? Prisma's advocates strongly believe that crowdsourcing could be the key to finding pieces of the puzzle that the police in Mesquite, Texas have missed. When a person goes missing, there's a special kind of pain in the not knowing. I want to tell you the stories of those who never came home. Today, I want to tell you the story of Prisma Reyes. I'm Kona Gallagher.
And I'm Ethan Flick.
And this is And Then They Were Gone. Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
Thank you for joining us once again. I apologize for not having this episode up earlier, but as I was writing it, I received some of the related police reports in a crowdsourced timeline, so I wanted to be able to give that the, time and attention that it deserves. The folks over at the Where is Prisma Reyes Facebook page have done an outstanding job of gathering information and keeping her story out there, even as Mesquite police have marked her case as inactive. Yeah, and so the family of Prisma, they are very active on the Facebook page, but it's actually run by a private investigator who has been working on the case. So it's a little bit different in that way, but there's a lot of good information there. But before we get started, we have a new member over on Patreon. So thank you so much to Tanya S. We really appreciate your support.
Thank you.
If you'd like to get in on the action on any level, you will not only get these episodes early and ad-free, but you will get your own copy of the And Then They Were Gone ebook. But now let's get into the story of Prisma Reyes. Prisma Denise Peralta Reyes was born on March 20th, 1993 in Veracruz, Mexico, to Lilia Peralta. Her father passed away shortly after her birth. Lilia, however, was able to find love again and married Dan Fuchs when Prisma was around 5. The family eventually moved to Mesquite, Texas, and Prisma was able to obtain her U.S. citizenship. Prisma was described by those who knew her as a bright and determined girl. After graduating from Kemp High School, Prisma attended Kaplan College, where she studied to become a paralegal. It was during college that Prisma met and started dating a man named Arturo. Prisma became pregnant, and the couple moved in together. 6 months into her pregnancy, the relationship ended, and Arturo reportedly kicked her out of the apartment. The breakup was contentious, as you can imagine. According to Prisma's family, Arturo never had anything to do with their son and refused to pay child support. Arturo disputes these claims, however, claiming that he paid nearly $60,000 over the years. And I mention this mainly because it does come into play later in the story. After the breakup, Prisma joined the National Guard at the rank of Private First Class. She eventually left and fulfilled her dream of becoming a paralegal, finding a job with the Ramos Law Firm in 2014. In 2016, Prisma also found new love with a man named Ryan. This relationship was also tumultuous. Prisma called police after a violent altercation with Ryan. She is observed with bruises on her body. Ryan was eventually convicted of a lesser charge, and the pair broke up. And I do believe they were living together at the time, and Prisma moved out. By early 2019, Prisma was definitely going through some hardships, though she kept a lot of her struggles hidden from those close to her. Prisma was let go from her paralegal position and took a new job as an administrative assistant at a used car dealership.
That's kind of a step down.
Yeah, and it's kind of a big thing in this case because it's just one of the incidents in her life that's unclear. We really don't know exactly what went down with the whole paralegal job because she had been there for several years. Because, like, after she went missing and her stepfather was talking to the press, she's like, oh, yeah, my daughter's a paralegal, blah, blah, blah. Like, he did not know about this new job. And because her family understandably disapproved of her ex, Ryan, she similarly failed to mention that they had begun to rekindle their relationship that February. One thing that her family did know about was that in the month or so leading up to her disappearance, Prisma was concerned for her safety. So much so, in fact, that she purchased a 9mm handgun for personal protection. She had told people that she felt like she was being watched or stalked and that the tires on her Jeep had been slashed.
And she's with Ryan or rekindling
Kind of
Ryan?
rekindling, quote unquote. Yeah.
But they're not living together.
No, no, no.
Okay. Well, if they're rekindling, it would seem weird that he would be the one
Slashing tires
doing
and stuff.
this.
Yeah. At the time of her disappearance, she was not living with Ryan. She and Dominic had their own apartment. So, like I said, we don't have any information on what led Prisma to lose her job, but she was seemingly starting to behave somewhat erratically. On the morning of her disappearance, Wednesday, April 17th, 2019, Prisma started the day by getting into a verbal altercation with one of her new coworkers.
At the car dealership.
Yeah. And she'd only been at the job for just a couple of weeks, so it seems a little early to start getting into fights with coworkers.
It's probably not good practice to ever get into fights with your coworker.
Yeah, not good form for sure. Apparently, the other coworker accused Prisma of stealing her favorite parking space, so I don't know.
It's a used car sales lot, right?
Yeah.
So one would assume that there's probably plenty of parking.
Yeah. One would think, but who knows? The rest of the morning at work seems relatively uneventful from what we know. Prisma's son's school calls her at work at 11:06. She returns the call 2 minutes later. Now, it sounds like they were calling because something happened at school because to my knowledge, Dominic was in attendance that day. So it wasn't the school calling to say that her son was absent or ask why. But we don't know what the deal was. We do know that her son was with the babysitter in the evening. But this call is from the car dealership's phone logs, and it's not mentioned in any of the coverage in the case that I've seen. And I only found out about it from the crowdsourced timeline that I mentioned earlier. So again, don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but seemingly something was going on at Dominic's school that morning. At 12:05, Ryan calls Prisma. This is likely either to make or confirm plans to meet for lunch that day. Prisma's son's school calls once again at 12:17, but I don't know if she picked up. I don't know if she talked to them. I don't have any more information on that. Now, the timeline gets a little wonky here, but it seems as though Prisma arrives at the agreed upon restaurant, E-Bar in Dallas, prior to Ryan. She calls him at 1:12 p.m., and then at 1:28, she receives an incoming call from an unknown number. According to early news reports, she's still on this call when Ryan arrives, and it sparks an argument between them. Ryan is apparently jealous about whomever she's speaking with.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, there are a lot of guys in Prisma's life, and a lot of them she talks to over the course of this day. But argument or whatever aside, the pair stays and has lunch at E-Bar. It seems as though at some point during this, Prisma decides she's not returning to work. Ryan and Prisma go out to the parking lot after about an hour. And again, I think she was already there for almost an hour before he even got there in the first place. So she's like way over her, allotted lunch break time, one would assume.
Maybe she just figured out, well, I just got into an argument with my coworker. I hate that job anyway.
Yeah, maybe. No idea.
That's clearly not a career.
Yeah, so after about an hour, like I said, they go out to the parking lot and Ryan leaves. And we do know this because he is seen on CCTV getting into his car and driving away from the restaurant.
And do we see her leave?
No, we see her return to the restaurant, go to the bar, and order a drink.
Oh.
Yeah, so she's like flat out like, I'm chilling.
So did she meet with somebody?
No, not at the restaurant. And all of this is happening before 2:30 because Ryan actually calls her at 2:30. Prisma stays at the bar. She's seen on her phone. And we know this because the bar actually has interior cameras. So we have footage of her and she looks totally normal. At 2:57, she contacts the law office in Aguilar, Colorado. And back to your point of her deciding like, hey, I don't like this job, I'm not going back. She could be making this call because it's another job opportunity at a law firm. So this truly could be why she decided to just ditch work for the rest of the afternoon. She might have not planned on going back. Now, the next phone call she makes is interesting, not because of who it's to, but because at 4:05, she calls Maria, her babysitter. And, normal, like it's 4:05, you're calling the woman who picked your kid up from school. So this in and of itself is obviously not striking. But according to their previous phone history, those calls wouldn't last more than 10 minutes. And this one lasted 52 minutes. So that's still a little strange, but what really kind of alarmed people is that when she was asked about it, Maria said that they didn't speak about anything out of the ordinary. She said that Prisma was just calling to confirm that she was picking up Dominic at 7:30. Yeah, that's not a 52-minute conversation. And then I read something else that said that, oh yeah, she talked about her workday and even mentioned the parking lot incident. And so I don't know what to make of any of this, if anything at all. I just think it's a little weird that her story kind of changed a few different times. It's just one of the many odd situations that's happening in this day of Prismas. But right after this phone call, we're talking about 5 o'clock now. Prisma gets into some sort of minor altercation with the bartender and is asked to leave. She's 86th. She is out. One thing I do find kind of weird is that no reporter ever found this bartender and was like, hey, what actually happened there at the bar? Like, I don't know. It just seems like in a case like this, that person would have come out by now. But now, while Prisma was known to drink, she was still a tiny woman. She was only about 5'2", 135 pounds. And at this point, she'd been drinking for about 4 to 5 hours.
So maybe the bartender kicked her out because she was drunk.
Yeah, I think that sounds likely based on what we find out later. So Prisma leaves E-Bar right around 5 p.m. and gets into her Jeep. And this is when things quickly begin to unravel for Prisma. At 5:06 p.m., a 911 call comes in from a woman who says that another woman driving a white Jeep pulled a gun on her and her passengers after a road rage incident. So we're talking like 5 minutes after she leaves the restaurant.
Well, I mean, so clearly she was drunk, and or is this unconfirmed as to whether that was actually her or not?
It was unconfirmed at the time, but yes, it was her. So according to the callers, there were several people who called the people in the car and then some witnesses as well. But according to multiple 911 calls, the woman, who we now know as Prisma, stops her Jeep, exits, and pulls a gun on the woman and her 2 female passengers. She gets back into her car at 5:09. She stays in her stopped car for another few minutes, then takes off, turning right on Fitzhugh and making another right on Crosstown. Despite police being dispatched and having this information, Prisma's whereabouts for the next half hour are unknown.
So did one of the callers give her license plate information?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the cops they weren't following her. The cops couldn't find her.
Yeah, the like one of the cars was one of the bystanders or the person who was involved in the road rage incident.
Got it.
Yeah, so the cops didn't find her. They were dispatched and Prisma disappeared. So we don't know where she was for the next half hour. Based on her phone records, we do know that she calls her friend Juan at 5:25 p.m. and then calls Ryan at 5:27. At 5:47 p.m., Prisma is seen on CCTV pulling up to Olympus at Ross Apartments. She parks her car quickly and haphazardly across the street from the parking garage, blocking what looks like an access road. You apparently need a key card to drive into the building's parking garage. These are like swanky, very fancy apartments. So that explains why she didn't try to drive into the garage and just parked across the street.
Whose apartments are... Okay, we're getting there.
Yeah. So basically, she was able to walk into the gate as, after somebody was going in or coming out. And so she gets into the parking garage on foot. Additional CCTV footage shows her inside the parking garage near the elevators. And the CCTV footage shows her on her phone. She's got her purse in one hand and she has like her car keys on a big lanyard. So she's carrying that as well. She calls Ryan 3 times between 5:54 and 5:57. She then makes 2 calls to her friend Chris, one lasting 1 minute and one lasting 4 minutes. In the second phone call, Chris tells investigators that Prisma sounded confused and angry, calling him Ryan and demanding that he tell her what apartment number is his. So this is the apartment complex where Ryan lives.
Oh, okay.
But it's a new place, so she's probably been there like maybe once or twice, or maybe not at all, just knows that that's the building he moved to because it's really close to E-Bar. But yeah, like it's not someplace he's lived a long time. It's not, where she lived with him. She's not super familiar with the building. And so you see her on the CCTV and she's like swaying. She eventually, when she's on the phone, she like kind of walks over to a wall and leans against it. I mean, she's clearly having a difficult time. And she seems agitated, and and that's what her stepfather noticed when he looked at it, is that she seemed agitated. So after this call with Chris, she hangs up and immediately calls Ryan again. She then calls her friend Juan again, who is like, okay, I'm out of town. I don't know what's going on, but I can have somebody come pick you up, because clearly she's just going through something. And so she's like, I don't even know where I am. I can't explain where I am. He's like, can you ping your phone? Which I think he basically means, can you drop like a location pin and send it? And then, he can figure out exactly where she is and then have somebody come get her. But she can't figure out how to do that on her phone. So eventually she just hangs up. Afterwards, Prisma calls Ryan one more time at 6:01 p.m. After this, her phone calls cease, but according to Detective Barrett, who's the lead investigator on this case, her phone was still communicating with cell phone towers. So she stopped using the phone, but the phone wasn't turned off, or it didn't die, at least not at that point.
And is she gone from the CCTV footage in the garage? Like, did she ever make it upstairs?
Yeah, so the last batch of phone calls happens just after Prisma is last spotted on CCTV at 5:50 p.m. She is never seen exiting the apartment building or the garage, and her car remains across the street, blocking the road. Now, later, other residents in the building reported seeing her basically riding the elevator. They see her. One reported seeing her on the roof, like on the roof deck of the garage, like crying. And, she asked if she was okay, and she said, just leave me alone. So people did see her around the building, but nobody saw her leave. So this is all, like I said, this phone calls stop at 6:00, and we don't hear anything from her. Prisma fails to pick up Dominic at 7:30 as expected. By 9:30, Maria, the babysitter, calls 911. Police actually do come and take a missing persons report. And after interviewing Maria, they go to Prisma's apartment to see if she's there. But of course, nobody answers. The next morning, police locate Prisma's Jeep right where she left it outside of the apartment building, blocking that road. Police search it and find her 9mm handgun inside, along with 2 cartridges. This is from the evidence list that's included with her missing persons report. But what I find potentially disturbing is that these items weren't logged until April 23rd, 5 days after Prisma was reported missing. I know that they had to have looked in her car the next day, the 18th, but I don't know. The date on it is 4/23.
Maybe that was just the day that they inventoried her car.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm hoping. Now, aside from the gun, 2 water bottles, one empty, one full, were recovered, along with a note that the private investigator working on her case says was on Prisma's windshield. The contents of that note haven't been released, but my guess is that it was a pissed off neighbor.
Yeah, don't park here.
Yeah. So I doubt that it's related to anything.
Sure.
The PI also said that an old Sanyo phone, potentially a burner and not Prisma's iPhone, was found in the parking garage. However, the thing that I find strange is that on the evidence log, it's listed as 4/23, which matches up with the logged contents of the Jeep, while the garage-related evidence is logged on 4/25. So I don't know. The PI said that it was just found in the parking garage, but like I said, the date matches up more with
The car.
the car. Yeah.
Well, also, if there was just a phone in the parking garage, there'd be no, like, sure, I can kind of see taking it as evidence, but, like, there's nothing linking that phone to her if it's just found in the parking garage and it's not an iPhone and you know she has an iPhone.
Yeah. But I think, they just took it just to see if, like I said, if it was a burner or.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I'm wondering whether it was found in the Jeep.
Yeah.
And mislabeled as being found in the parking garage.
Yeah, I'm not sure. The April 25th evidence includes swabs from the gun and water bottles, a swab from a stain on the 5th floor of the garage, which is one of the floors that Prisma was seen on, and 3 vague entries that just say 4th floor garage, 5th floor, and abandoned lot Roseland at McCoy. And that's it. Doesn't say what they got from the 4th floor or this abandoned lot. On 5-2, there's an entry for, quote, items used for scent tracking, end quote. Police fail, though, to turn up more evidence of her whereabouts and say that it's possible that she just left the building on her own accord because not every exit is covered by security cameras.
Okay.
Yeah. So even though she's clearly seen coming in, she's clearly seen inside, there is a possibility that she could have left via another route. But if she did that, she didn't go back to her car, which was parked, right there.
Right.
And again, while that's certainly possible, Prisma was witnessed by several residents in and around the building, and she stuck out because she was acting oddly. I said multiple residents saw her crying in the building, in the garage, and then also just this neighborhood, it's rush hour in a very busy area.
Mm-hmm.
So if she had walked out of the building, I feel like somebody would have noticed because everybody was noticing Prisma that day. She was not exactly being low profile, but nobody reported seeing her. And she's wearing like a bright red polo shirt as well. She stands out, and she's acting kind of erratically. So I just feel like if she had just walked out of the building at 6:00, somebody would have reported seeing her. So what happened to Prisma? When the story first broke, it seems as though her family didn't understand why her car was found at the Olympus on Ross apartments. Remember, she hadn't told them that she was rekindling her relationship with Ryan, and they also had no idea that he lived there.
Right.
Once everything started coming out, however, he obviously went to the top of the list that police wanted to talk to.
Yeah.
I mean,
last known apartment or last known location.
Yeah.
Ex.
Yeah. An ex with a violent past. They were together that afternoon. They got into a little bit of an altercation.
Yeah.
According to the limited information that has been released, Ryan was out with friends all evening and didn't return home until 4 a.m. That's his story. Now, this alibi has apparently been corroborated enough that police currently do not consider him to be a suspect.
Well, so maybe that's the reason why she was getting so upset with him and repeatedly calling him because he wasn't home.
Right. And that's the thing, too, because stories about where he was differed because, I've read things that said he was just out with friends. And then, but her stepfather, Dan, has said that he was out on a date. So, I don't know which was true,
Could go either way.
Exactly. So apparently he was nearby, though. Reports said he was in a different town. But from what I've read, like wherever he was 8 miles away or, something like that. So he was nearby. But as I mentioned, police said that he does have a solid alibi that has been corroborated, though, of course, they don't give details on what it is and what the corroboration is.
They're not going to.
Right. It should also be noted that, the main reason why people still have a bad feeling about this guy, other than his past, is that although he did apparently cooperate with police and, answer whatever questions, like he's never talked to Prisma's family. He's never, assisted in any of the searches. And though this is unconfirmed, I have read that he moved out of that apartment pretty quickly thereafter.
Okay, I mean, nothing super damning.
No, but it's just something to give people like a bad feeling, right? And then also about a year after her disappearance, the PI who's been working on the case, like finally got him to agree to, talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that he was like incredibly cagey and super unhelpful and just like was not attempting to give them good information.
So not that I'm defending this guy in any way,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know whether I would want to cooperate with a PI or the police or anybody talking about an ex-girlfriend who is now missing either. I mean, there's a lot of potential to implicate yourself in something there.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And we saw this in the Leah Croucher case because the man who she had secretly been seeing, Adnan, was the main suspect in a lot of people's minds, though not the police's minds, but in her family, like the public, for these exact same reasons. Like he never talked to the family, he never assisted with searches, like he never did anything. And it turned out that Leah was taken by a completely random person.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I understand why people have like a bad feeling about this guy, but I do also understand it from his perspective as well.
We also don't know what the issue was with the argument or the altercation at the bar.
Right.
Maybe they had broken up again.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's why she decided to stay and keep drinking.
Yeah.
And that's why she was so upset. And that's why she ended up at his apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't know the full story there.
No, I know. And that's the problem, is that so many weird things happened that day that it's so hard to kind of, one, figure out the entire story, but two, like figure out what matters and what doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. What details matter.
Yeah, because I think there are a lot of red herrings in this story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, going back to Ryan, even after that kind of failed interview, the PI who has been posting on the Web Sleuths forum about this says that she actually doesn't consider him to be like a main suspect. Now, suspect number 2 was Arturo, Dominic's father. And this is mainly because he's another ex and the father of her child.
Yeah, but I mean, was he in her life or in Dominic's life?
No, not really. So that's actually interesting. He lived about 8 hours away at the time and was not terribly involved in Dominic's life. In fact, he also later went on Web Sleuths and said that he hadn't spoken to Prisma since August of the previous year. So August of 2018, and we're talking April of 2019 at this point. So yeah, he was like not around. He was not really involved in Dominic's life. But about a month after Prisma's disappearance, he applied for emergency custody of Dominic.
Well, I mean...
So Dominic had been staying with Prisma's mother ever since her disappearance. And so then he went to court and tried to get him.
So for me, I don't think that that's suspicious, right? I mean, so I worked CPS as a social worker, and I saw that in a couple of cases where, dad didn't want to have anything to do with the kid. Mom loses custody one way or the other, and then dad comes in and says he wants custody.
I mean, I can definitely see that. And it's one of those things that, like, he was never, again, at the top of the suspect list, but it was just one thing that made people go like, okay, well, maybe this was like some weird convoluted plan to like get custody of his son or something,
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can definitely see the suspicion around him, but at the same time, if he lived 8 hours away, it'd be pretty easy to alibi him.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that's what happened.
Right.
He just was not anywhere near the area. On a happier note, he and Prisma's family were able to kind of connect and come to an agreement on Dominic. And so basically they share, or at least as of a year after the disappearance, they were sharing custody.
Oh, that's good.
So it seems like Arturo did become more involved in Dominic's life, but Dominic was still able to stay with, his mom's family who he had grown up with since birth. And so, as much as the story is awful, like there is at least that kind of silver lining in there. And I know this because Arturo also for a time posted frequently on the Web Sleuths forum, and he answered questions like about his relationship with her, like what he knew about her, and, was really just trying to be as forthright and helpful as he could. And oftentimes, talked about how frustrated he was with police and how he didn't feel that they were doing a good enough job trying to find Prisma, and that like the private investigators and other people seemed to be doing a lot more. After about a year had passed after Prisma was last seen, he said that it was impossible to get a call back from detectives or any updates. He said that theories weren't being followed up on, and he, like I said, was just generally disappointed in the police investigation. So, all right, remember how I said there were a lot of red herrings or potential red herrings in this story,
Yes.
and like a lot of like random people in this story?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other thing that people didn't know about at the time and only came out later is that Prisma's Jeep wasn't in her name.
Oh.
Yeah, it was in the name of some guy named Alfredo. Nobody seems to know who this guy was or like why he bought Prisma a Jeep. This was apparently not something that she had told anybody, because after this came out, like I saw a lot of posts on the Facebook page and in Web Sleuths going like, yeah, I wish we would have known about this sooner. We have no idea. I don't know what that's about. He is apparently not on the call logs from that day. So all of the phone calls and everything that Prisma made apparently does not include him. Although there is one number that is there that they have not been able to identify.
And the police aren't saying anything about this Alfredo?
Nope. No. And so like the PI, everybody working on this case outside of the police don't know if he was interviewed, to what extent he was interviewed, or really anything.
I mean, if I were on the case, I would want to interview him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah, me too.
Just to get an understanding of how that happened, what their relationship was like. I mean, I would assume that they would have subpoenaed her financial records.
Right. And yeah, they did. And because it is mentioned that, none of her cards or anything were ever used after that day, et cetera, et cetera. So like, yeah, they did. They had all that. They obviously had her phone records. They had everything.
Right. So, I mean, looking at I would want to look at the car payments too.
Right.
Presumably if she's making the car payments, then like, are the car payments up to date?
Yeah.
Or is she faulting on this? And whoever this guy is, I mean, just a motive theory, wildly throwing it out there, that could be potential motive.
Yeah, I have no idea. It's so strange. And interestingly, so I mentioned that like Ryan's name, hasn't been released by police. And I didn't dig like super, super hard to try to find it. But in one of the police reports, Alfredo's name was...
they name Alfredo?
No, they redacted it. They just didn't do a very good job of redacting it.
Oh, no.
And so I could see it. So I found his whole name and his whole address. And I did a background check on him just to see if he had like any sort of criminal record or anything super shady. And nothing violent, but he actually does have like a car theft charge from, way before this. But
is it for a Jeep?
No, I don't believe so. No, the Jeep was bought from CarMax.
Oh, okay.
Pretty legitimately. So yeah, so I don't know. I mean, again, this could have nothing to do with anything.
Right, yeah.
But like, it's just another weird fucking thing that just popped up in this story full of just weird events. And so, yeah, like 4 years later, so the 4-year anniversary of her disappearance just passed about, 2 weeks or so before we're recording this. And it's unclear, like, if the secret car buyer, the job change, the ex/current boyfriend, the drinking during the day, like, we don't know how much any of this had to do with her disappearance, if it did at all.
Right.
Even Detective Barrett, the lead investigator on the case, said that they should have more evidence of what happened to Prisma. He told reporters, quote, "In 2019, the amount of video surveillance around major metropolitan cities like Dallas, I would have expected to have more camera footage than we had. There were several exits to that complex that were not covered with cameras, so we have no idea what happened," end quote.
I know you had said that there were several residents who had witnessed her.
Yeah.
Have you been able to find any kind of like breakdown of the timeline of that versus phone calls?
Yeah. I mean, so it was basically all before 6 p.m.
I guess what I'm asking is, what was the last known contact? Was it that she was seen by somebody or in the building, or
I believe
was it a phone call?
I believe it was the phone call at like 6:01 p.m. The last CCTV footage was 10 minutes before that, and I think the last time anybody physically saw her in person was just a little bit before that.
Okay.
From my understanding, nobody physically saw her after the phone call stopped at 6 p.m.
And do we know where she was in the building at the last eyewitness statement?
I'm not entirely sure of the order. I think it was the top of the parking garage, but I cannot be certain.
Okay. That's what I was kind of thinking.
Right. And that's actually kind of interesting. There are obviously a lot of theories. The first one being that, Ryan came and they got into an argument, something happens.
Yeah.
Et cetera, right? Like that's,
That's the obvious.
That's the obvious one, right? Like that's going to be the first thing. She came, they got into a fight, she came, she's upset, she's like trying to get a hold of him. The thought is like he came back, whatever. But, it is interesting because as I was reading it, I was going through it kind of with that mindset, not so much that he necessarily did come back and harm her, but that she went there to kind of continue the argument or to like make up with him or, something related to their lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
To kind of like continue whatever was happening. And I was seeing it from that perspective. But what somebody brought up, and now it really made me change the way I was looking at it, was that there's an actual better chance. What makes maybe a little bit more sense wasn't that she was like, oh my God, I've got to see you again, Ryan. Like, because, she seemed pretty chill after he left the restaurant. She didn't seem like she was like desperately trying to like go after him or anything like that. She hung out for another 3 hours. I think what makes more sense is that she leaves the restaurant, gets into this road rage incident. They call the cops. And she's trying to hide from the police.
Oh, yeah. Well, that would make sense.
Yeah. And so she drives around trying to maybe figure out what to do and then decides to go to Ryan's apartment building because he lives nearby.
Right.
Can't get in, through the gate, ditches the car, runs in, probably assuming that Ryan's there and that like he can come down, like let her in, she can hide her car in here and just kind of lay low. And so I think that's why she's like frantically calling him.
Yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense.
Right? Like not so much like this is like a scorned woman or anything like that. I think it's more of a practical like, oh shit, I'm drunk. I pulled a gun on somebody. I really fucked up.
Yeah.
And like I need to like lay low. Yeah, so I think that makes a lot more sense. And that, if you look at it that way, then that also takes more suspicion off of Ryan, right?
Yeah. Because he answers a couple of phone calls, hey, I'm not home. Like,
I don't know if he ever answered any of them, though. So that
really?
I don't know for sure, because all of those phone calls were like a minute on the call log.
Oh.
And so that can indicate that they just went to voicemail or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
He answered real quick and was like, yeah, I'm not home, or he didn't answer at all. But I think it makes sense that she was just getting like freaked out because of this whole, car road rage incident. And yeah, it was just like increasingly panicking basically. So given that, one of the theories that has come out is not murder at all, but death by misadventure. Meaning, Prisma was clearly under the influence. She could have had some sort of accident at the building and just have never been found.
Yeah, so I guess how would she not be found though?
Well, I'm glad you asked because there are some sub-theories of this. One is the dumpster theory. And this is one of the theories that Arturo was like kind of mentioning when he was complaining about the police not following up on things. So apparently at this time, there was a large construction dumpster parked behind the building. And I'm not sure of the exact location, but based on where it was, people who are familiar with the building and who like saw this dumpster, it was possible to fall into it, like from perhaps
From
the
the
parking
roof?
garage. I'm not 100% on the logistics, but it does seem like people did think that that was logistically possible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another logistic possibility is that somebody did harm her and put her in that dumpster.
Sure.
And, because police didn't actually search the apartment complex in that area for several days, there is a chance that that is what happened. She was placed in there with her belongings, or fell in there, or did whatever, ended up in there with her belongings that she had, and her phone eventually died.
Mm-hmm.
And so then eventually just stopped pinging on its own, and then she went away.
I'd be curious to know, you mentioned that there was a canine search. There was something in the evidence log about
scent.
material used for scent.
Yeah, that's the only thing I've ever read about that, but yeah.
Yeah, so I would be curious to know where the scent stopped.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, the police have not been
Well, no, they're not
going
to. No, of course not. They can't, because if it.
Well, no, I mean, I wouldn't say that at all, because we see a lot of cases where they do give that information. Like the dogs follow the scent to X location and then lost it. I mean, we do see that a lot. So I think that they could have, but they have not. So we don't know.
Yeah, if the scent led to the roof of the parking garage.
Yeah.
And then stopped.
Right.
Which would indicate either a fall or a push.
That goes into the main problem, is that this is a large apartment building, and this is a large parking garage. And while they were searched, and like Ryan's actual apartment was searched and his car was searched, like we don't know how thoroughly the building itself was searched. Now, the other option, if we go kind of back to death by misadventure, is that Prisma is still in the building. And I know that sounds unlikely 4 years later, without anybody noticing, but it has happened before. There was a woman in Australia who fell into a trash chute in a similar kind of high-rise apartment building, which this building also has a trash chute. And she apparently fell in, survived the fall, but the mechanisms involved with the trash chute, like whatever it was, something severed an artery, and she ended up bleeding out.
And she was not.
So she was found relatively quickly, but not immediately.
Okay.
But there was also the story of a man who worked at a restaurant and went missing and was found 12 years later behind a refrigerator.
How did they not smell it?
Yeah, so I don't know in that specific case, but there have been some cases where, and I think there was another woman where a lady like literally went into the ductwork of a building and got stuck and died. And because of just like the temperature and the location and all the other factors, she basically mummified. And so the smell like wasn't that bad, I guess.
That sounds like a episode of CSI.
Yeah, or like the X-Files or something,
yeah.
right? And so, yeah, I mean, obviously those are not common occurrences.
Sure.
But strange things happen. And she was never seen leaving the building. Prisma's son Dominic has lived the last 4 years without his mother. While the Mesquite police say that their focus is on getting answers for him, they don't seem to be doing a whole lot in order to make that happen. Even though, as I mentioned at the top of this episode, they've officially marked this case as inactive, they are also refusing FOIA requests from the family.
Because it's a quote-unquote active investigation?
Yep.
But it's listed as inactive?
Yep.
Love it.
Yeah. So the PI just recently, put a FOIA request. She had to do like 4 separate ones. And they were all denied based on like the law enforcement privilege, And so it might get appealed, who knows? But as of now, Mesquite police do not want to give out any more information than they already have, which is the very short missing persons report that very incomplete inventory list and the 911 records from the road rage incident that were also redacted. But I mean, most of the important stuff was there. Also Alfredo's name, but and so that's why I feel like it's so important to get this story out there now. The 4-year anniversary has just passed, and the entire update given by the Mesquite police is as follows. Quote, "There are no pending or active leads at this time. We will continue to follow up on any possible information received and ask that if anyone has any information about this case to please contact the Mesquite Police Department." End quote. 4 years.
Wow.
That's what they have to offer.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they did, like, this was featured on the Unsolved Mysteries podcast, I think, recently, a year or two ago. And, like, the detectives gave an interview. But, I mean, yeah, that's it.
Way to wash your hands of this.
Yeah. But clearly there's more information out there to be had about this. I mean, she did not get sucked off the earth by aliens. Like, she is somewhere.
Yeah.
So if you would like to help, please go to the Where is Prisma Reyes Facebook page. You can learn more about the case and submit any tips that you may have. But also, like, they put out calls for assistance on there too that you can help with, even if you're not, in the Mesquite, Dallas, Texas area. There are definitely things that you can do to help. They always are trying to gather more information and publicize the case. And they're also still actively investigating, unlike the Mesquite Police Department, and seemingly making headway. This post from just 4 days before we're recording this episode says of this new information, quote, "I promise it's coming at the right time. We're still trying to verify a few things. We have a few good theories. One is definitely leading by far." End quote. So it does seem like things are happening in this case, which is so amazing because Prisma's family has never stopped searching for her. Her stepfather, Dan, said, quote, "Ever since I started trying to find her and everything else, it's never been about finding her for me, for her mother, for her brothers or sister, or nobody else. Strictly for Dominic. Someday it'll all come out. We'll find her." End quote. Prisma Reyes has been missing from Mesquite, Texas since April 17th, 2019. She's an Hispanic female with brown hair and brown eyes. Her height is estimated to be 5 foot 2 inches and she weighs approximately 135 pounds. She was last seen wearing a red shirt and blue jeans. Anyone with information related to Prisma's disappearance is urged to contact the Mesquite Police Department at 972-285-6336. Anonymous tips can also be submitted online via North Texas Crime Stoppers or by calling its tip line at 877-373-8477. You can see all the sources for this episode along with photos and videos at our website, andthentheywegone.com.
And be sure to follow us on social, and Then They Were Gone Pod on Facebook and at ATTWG Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe and consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It will help new listeners find us. And the more people that listen, the more chances we have of bringing someone home.
And we'll see you here next week for a brand new episode.
See you next week.
And Then They Were Gone is hosted by Kona Gallagher and Ethan Flick. All research, writing, and editing is done by Kona Gallagher. Theme music is The Stork by Ketsa. Additional music is provided by Kai Engel. And Then They Were Gone is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!